from the heart of rural France. This is the Keto Woman podcast, brought to you by me. Hello Keto Lovelies, I'm Daisy Brackenhall, and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence, and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight, after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. I've been keto now for over 2 years, and it has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs under 20 grams a day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds and the incidental carbs you find in things like full fat dairy. Choose delicious fatty proteins and be free and easy with oily dressings on salad and butter on your veggies. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalized keto. You'll hear all sorts of ways to keto from my guests. There is no one way to do keto, no one size fits all. I hope to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we really can't give you medical advice. It's always best to consult your own doctor when making big changes to your diet and lifestyle, because they know you and your medical history, and so have access to the bigger picture. Wouldn't it be helpful to have one place where you could find all the links? Want to sign up to my new Patreon exclusive Facebook group, Daisy's Lovelies? No problem. How about subscribing to my YouTube channel? Please help me notch up my first 1,000 subscribers by going to links.ketowomanpodcast.com and following the YouTube link. Not following me on Instagram yet? Hit the Instagram button. You get the idea. All the buttons, all the links you need are at links.ketowomanpodcast.com. Welcome to episode number 110 with extraordinary woman Lucy Burns. Lucy was first on the podcast just over a year ago with her friend and colleague Jo Pollett. If you haven't listened already, why not check it out? Episode number 55. Dr. Lucy Burns graduated from medicine at Monash University in 1993 and completed general practice training in 1998. After watching the astronomical increase of obesity, diabetes and chronic disease, she changed her practice style and began to address the root cause of disease through lifestyle changes. She became a certified lifestyle medicine physician and a clinical hypnotherapist. She is a sought-after public speaker and has spoken at multiple medical conferences on the management of obesity and weight loss. Lucy runs a successful weight loss clinic called Epiphany Medical Weight Loss and advises a low-carb lifestyle. The clinic has become so busy that it's time to expand into an online program. She and her colleague Dr. Mary Barson have formed a business called Real Life Medicine and are launching a program that addresses both the physiological and psychological causes of obesity. They implement positive psychology and hypnotherapy to promote behavioural change, and both draw upon their own experiences to address sugar and food addiction with a positive, compassion-centred approach. Lucy lives on the Mornington Peninsula with her husband and 2 teenage daughters. They have a small acreage with 3 horses, a miniature cow, a goat, 3 dogs, 4 cats, 4 ducks, 3 frogs and a bearded dragon. Life is busy. Welcome, Lucy, to the Keto Woman podcast. How are you doing today?
Great, Daisy. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's been a long time since we recorded together.
Yeah, it has. I know. I think maybe over a year.
I think so. I meant to look it up before we started to see just how long, but I think at least a year.
Yeah.
I will have already in the introduction referred people back to your first episode, but why don't you just, for those new to the podcast who haven't heard your story before, why don't you just refresh our memories quickly?
Okay, so the last podcast I did was with Dr. Joe Pollitt, and so we're both doctors in Australia in Melbourne, and we talked a bit back then about low carb, and again, Australia, like probably half the world, is very late to coming to the low carb party. Both of us run low carb clinics, and we talked a bit about, things to ask your GP or how to approach your GP about low carb. So I guess my story on how I came to low carb, because again, it always has to be a personal journey, I think, for doctors to embrace it. If you just hear about it, you just go, oh yeah, and move on. My story is, again, it's not super exciting. It's like a lot of people I have had, well, it's interesting. When I started back dieting when I was 16 and I thought I was overweight, then I now look back and realise I wasn't. But
I know, isn't that annoying? I do exactly the same thing.
I know.
And I remember very clearly how I felt about the way I looked at the time. And I look back at pictures now and, oh dear.
I know. And yeah, I know. And again, I guess that's that society pressure to conform to norms that perhaps are not always either A, appropriate or B, realistic. So, But anyway, yes, so I started my dieting career with the Scarsdale diet, which I think is a low fat something or other. And, then progressively worked my way through every other diet known to man. Would lose weight, of course, stop the diet, put it back on, start another diet, lose the weight, put it back on. And got married, had 2 kids, and put on a lot of weight in pregnancy. And again, I didn't eat any differently, but my body obviously decided to store a lot of fat. But again, then spent the next time obsessing about, getting the baby body back, which, was ridiculous now that I look back at it. Instead of just enjoying the time, I was obsessed with how I looked and how I felt.
Well, again, that's something you see in the media, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That whole how quickly these celebrities lose their baby bump. But it's an interesting point, actually, just to take you back to that, because it does seem to be a time when a lot of women gain a fair bit of weight. And like you say, they're not necessarily doing, you hear the whole, oh, you're eating for 2. They're not necessarily doing the eating for 2. So why is it so often? It seems very unfair. You're already going through quite a lot to gain more weight than you would need to for growing that baby.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about it is that it's not to do with your food, and I guess highlights that whole idea of the calories in, calories out model, not working, because for most women, they don't. In fact, for a lot of women, they eat less in the first 3 months. They feel sick all the time, so they're not eating. Then maybe they return to just their normal eating and their body just packs on weight, which is all to do with insulin resistance. So as you become more pregnant, as the weeks go on, our body becomes more insulin resistant. So when that happens, and I guess I'll talk to you about my concept of the woodshed, but basically our body goes into fat storing mode, and any little bit of energy that you consume just gets stored straight as fat. And evolutionarily, that makes sense because, your body is wanting to prepare for this baby, and what if there's a famine and you've got a new baby and there's no food and there's, so it kind of makes sense. And the ridiculous thing is that instead of our society embracing this concept and saying, look, this is what happens in pregnancy, it's meant to be, the women in particular that are gaining weight, well, they're good for a famine. We don't do that. We just blame them for, eating too much And I guess that's one of the things that I remember my obstetrician said to me, whatever you do, don't gain too much weight. And I'm thinking, oh, thanks for that tip, buddy. But you know, how's that going to happen? Like, what do I do? I was eating well. Of course I was, I was obsessed. I was going to Pilates. I was doing that baby bump thing that you do because you've got this whole idea that you want to create the perfect environment for your baby. So, I wasn't
Well,
eating.
that's also the other thing that you're told, isn't it? That it's important that you eat well to prepare for the baby. So you can't say the two things at the same time.
No. And you do. And the eating well, that's the problem. Eating well is the problem when you're pregnant, when you're eating lots of carbs because, again, that's what you're told to do. That's the recommendation. But really, particularly the second half of pregnancy, we really should be much lower carb. That would serve us well.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting. So then continuing on my dieting career, it's funny, if people ever look at my Facebook profile, they'll think I've never had a weight problem because I've deleted all the photos where I'm overweight. And so there's only the sort of the thin photos, which is another kind of thing we do in our society is we don't ever want to look. It's funny, isn't it, this whole idea that if you're a bit overweight, you're somehow a bad person or you're somehow a failure. But anyway, it got to the point where I was decided, I'm going to lose weight. And I thought, I'm not doing a diet. I'm just going to eat well. And this was back, obviously, pre-low carb. And my eating well consisted of having breakfast, most important meal of the day, then being hungry by 10 o'clock. So, eating an apple or something like that. And then for work, I would take this and I'd have a bowl of muesli with some yogurt and some mango. And everyone's telling me, oh, my God, Lucy, look how healthy you are. And I'm thinking, shining my halo. And the problem was that each lunchtime, about half an hour afterwards, I'd still be hungry. I'd end up having another bowl of muesli. I was eating enough muesli. I felt like a horse, seriously, eating chaff. Still hungry. After lunch, tired, wanting to have a little nap and not losing a scrap of weight. So then feeling really ripped off that I'm doing this thing where I'm hungry all the time and not losing any weight. And so that was rubbish. And then, you know what? I actually gave up on myself. I just decided, I was 40-something, 48, and I thought, that's it. I'm just a middle-aged, frumpy woman. I bundled up all my thin clothes into a bag and I just thought, I'm just going to have to go with elastic waisted pants and loose tops. And, that's fine. I'm okay with that, I'm telling myself. And I was on holiday with this lovely friend of mine and I saw her and I go, oh my God, you look awesome. What are you doing? And she talked to me about low carb. And my initial thought, like probably a lot of people, was, well, I'm not doing that rubbish diet. What do you mean no fruit? As I was sitting there piously eating carrot sticks, and I'd offered her one. She goes, no, I don't eat carrot sticks. And I'm going, what? So I saw what she was eating because we were away and I thought, oh my God, this looks good. Maybe I could do this. So I gave it a crack. I thought, what have I got to lose? And then I was suddenly hooked. And then that's when I went, I go, righty, I got to know more about this. And I think for me, the fact that my friend who was a doctor, who was smart too, she did really well in uni. I thought, right, you know what you're talking about. You're not going to do some crazy thing. So having somebody that I trusted kind of leading the way made it easier for me then to let go of some of these long-held beliefs that I'd had of things like fruit's good for you and, eating all this butter, surely that can't be good for me. And so then I lost 20 kilos and threw out all the fat clothes. Fortunately, I'm so disorganized I hadn't given the thin clothes away yet. I was still sitting in a bag waiting for the salvos, and they're now back in my cupboard, and 2 years on, I haven't looked back. So then it became my passion, and that's when I started my weight loss clinic, where I basically just see people morning, noon and night, talking to them. And I mean, it's great. It's a fantastic job. I get to bang on about low carb all day. It's brilliant. And seeing the results for people. But the interesting thing I found, and it's really funny because, we talk about diet and exercise. And, I started off saying it's 80% diet, 20% exercise. Then over time I realized actually it's no percent exercise. And we can talk a little bit more about that. It's all about the diet. And then I've realized actually it's only probably about maybe 50% the diet and 50% the mind, because you've got to be able to sort your mind out and to embrace some of the changes, and rather than looking at your losses, looking at your gains. And the only loss that you hopefully get is a number on the scales.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? That's often the biggest focus for people.
Yeah.
And that can be a stumbling block in itself.
Yes. And in fact, just as I said that, you're completely right. And in fact, it was kind of a pun, but not really, because I'm actually not obsessed at all with the scales. I think the scales can be our frenemy. Sometimes they're our friend and sometimes they're not. And again, it just goes back to diet history, doesn't it? That you're all about your number on the scales. What the number on the scales, means that you're a good person, or the number on the scales means that you're successful, or the number on the scales means that you're losing fat. And I think that whole concept of talking about fat and weight, we just use the term weight, but really it's not even about, it's about just health is really what it's about, and getting to the point where you're metabolically healthy, and that can look different for different people. So that idea, and I guess that's that idea of the TOFI, isn't it? The thin on the outside, fat on the inside is, they might look well to the general population and, they're fitting into their size 8 jeans or whatever, but inside their body's going, no, I've got a fatty liver, I'm about to get diabetes and all of those things. So I think that idea that we judge people, we judge their health based on what they look like, is wrong. And I'll give you a little example. I was, I know these 2 girls, and one of them's a string bean, and she's got, they're adolescent kids. So one's string bean, beautiful, perfect skin, looks healthy. The other one has polycystic ovarian syndrome. So she's got high insulin, which is just her genes, as in her genetic genes, not her size 8 genes. Her genes mean that she's got high insulin, and that leads to the whole idea of having acne and she's overweight. So when these 2 girls eat the same food, society judges one and not the other. And it's wrong. We shouldn't, we just need to do less judging, I think. And then I reckon if we judged less and we talked about everyone less and we criticised less, the side effect of that, or the flow on, would be that we would judge ourselves less. Because in my practice, I see so many people, and particularly women, judging and berating and criticising themselves and feeling hopeless. And that doesn't work with anybody.
No.
And I think this is, and again, we were talking earlier about, my favourite thing to talk about is analogies. And I use a lot of dog analogies. And one of them is that when you're teaching behaviour to a dog, if you're asking the dog to sit, you start off and you might push its bottom down and you say, sit, and the dog looks up at you and you go, oh, good dog, well done. And you go, good. And you pat it and you over the top praise for this action of sitting. And then if the dog stands up, you don't go, oh, hopeless. I knew you wouldn't be able to stick to it. Can't do anything right. I told you to sit and you just can't even do that. We don't do that to the dog. We just go, oh, and we just correct it and we go, oh, sit, and you push its bottom back down and then you praise it. And so when you do that over and over, the dog goes, oh, right, oh, I'm sitting. And so it does it willingly instead of doing it because it's criticised. And we all know, if you've got a dog and you berate it and you yell at it and you cross with it and you shout at it all the time, the dog ends up cowering in the corner and it's always afraid of making a move. As people, we need to be treating ourselves a bit like the dog. You be kind to yourself, because you're much more likely to succeed at your goals when you do it with kindness and compassion rather than berating. We've got a bit off topic there. I can't remember.
I was going to ask you, actually, you talk about how your own passion has come through into your work and what you do. And I was just going to ask you what the environment is like in Australia for talking about low carb, because I think everyone knows about the problems that Gary Fettke had. Has that had a knock-on effect, a positive knock-on effect for what you're doing now? Before we hear about that knock-on effect, I'm just going to interrupt for a moment to tell you about the sponsors of this week's podcast. You heard from Colin Stuckert, CEO of Wild Foods, last week. Have you tried their wild black truffle salt yet? How about their Cocoa Tropic drink powder, which is a blend of cocoa, turmeric and adaptogenic mushroom powder? Cocoa butter, fish oil, vanilla powder, the list goes on. Real foods sustainably sourced from small farms around the world. I love the products and I really respect the Wild Mission, where they believe real food is medicine and that education is the world's greatest asset. Use code KETOWOMAN to get your 12% discount at wildfoods.co. Do you like nuts? How about when they are made into nut butters and mixed with other yummy ingredients? Put in perfect grab-and-go pouches for you to take with you on your travels or for a post-workout meal or breakfast on the go. I'd recommend getting a variety pack so you can try all the regular flavours, but they also have a new flavour, chocolate mint, which sounds delicious. They have a nifty little resealable lid if you are the kind of person who doesn't eat them all in one go. For those of you who are like me and do, there is also an easy tear top so you can open them up to scrape up every last little bit. Use discount code DAISY to get 15% off your order at superfat.com and let me know which flavour you like the best. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Wild Foods and Superfat for supporting this podcast and helping me get more episodes to you. Let's get back to Lucy and find out more about the Gary Fettke effect.
Well, I think now, look, when he was sanctioned by AHPRA, who's our regulatory body, it became very difficult, particularly for GPs, because Gary's an orthopaedic surgeon and he was sanctioned about talking about diet and things like that, but he could still do the rest of his work as far as surgery goes. So he still had a career. It wasn't his passion, but he could still work. Whereas as a GP, if you're told you can't talk about diet, and if you do, we're going to sanction you, or nutrition or any of that sort of stuff, that's kind of really core to some of our business, if you like, what we talk to people about. You know, we're always banging on about diet and lifestyle. So for a lot of GPs, they were very frightened about it and very worried that they would be sanctioned and perhaps, potentially deregistered. But fortunately, Gary and Belinda did such an amazing job of fighting AHPRA and exposing some of the myths around low carb and those sorts of things that AHPRA has cleared them. And I guess that has paved the way now for people to at least talk openly about it. And I certainly have no qualms advertising myself as a low carb doctor, using even the word, keto. So the environment is okay if you're open to the idea, but still a lot of doctors think it's a fad. They think it's not sustainable. They're not interested. I think that's part of the problem. It's hard. Talking to people about lifestyle is hard. It doesn't, it takes a longer consultations for us. We have a Medicare model where there are rebates for your consultations and they're time-based. And the longer you take with the person, the less you get. So financially, it's not lucrative to be sitting there for 40 minutes talking to a person about, low carb or what are their challenges. It's much quicker to just write a script, see you later, and out you go, and you make more money doing it. So there's a disincentive in our current medical model to spend time with people. But also, again, we're still caught in that trap of looking for, a quick solution, an easy solution, something within the guidelines that is still rubbish. And I think a lot of people don't, that low-fat message, it was so ingrained in our training, in the 80s and 90s, and even now, people still looking at low fat as their first line management for cardiovascular disease. So you can see I see for the general public how confusing it is. If you've got your doctor who says, no, you need to eat low fat, well, obviously a lot of people will believe them. The people that I see, a lot of them have done their own research and they seek me out because they know I'm going to support their lifestyle. But a lot of them also have never heard of it. So, they come because I talk about weight and I'm, obsessed with weight management, not to look like a supermodel. I'm not interested in anybody, having those expectations. It's more about that concept of weight management for health. So that, and it's not even the weight. The weight is the symptom. The cause is the insulin. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners know that. But if we can get the insulin down, then all the other flow-on effect is good for their health.
And you've gone on to develop different things. So you've been starting new businesses. Tell us about that.
Well, interestingly, so again, your listeners will remember I have a business called Epiphany Medical Weight Loss. And obviously I chose the word epiphany because for me it was an epiphany, a whole different way of looking at food and diet. But the problem now, and it's a good problem to have, is that I'm booked out for 3 months. So if someone wants to come, they have to wait, and and that's difficult. So then I thought, okay, how are we going to get this message out in a way that is easy for people to understand to more people? So I've teamed up with a couple of other doctors. So we have Dr. Olivia Rimington and Dr. Mary Barson, who I've met at various low carb conferences along the way, and who, like me, have other health challenges. So Olivia has type 1 diabetes and Mary has polycystic ovarian syndrome. And we have lived experiences of what it's like to be perhaps overweight and feeling unhealthy and actually being unhealthy. And so part of our mission statement, I guess, is to be able to bring this course and messages to a wider range of people in a way that people can understand it without having to necessarily watch 500 videos of people doing talks for the various low carb conferences. Because for a lot of people, A, they haven't got the time. B, some of the talks are pretty complicated, and some people love that. Some people love the science, but a lot of people, it's overwhelming. Everything's overwhelming. So we try and break it down into really some layman's terms, and as you know, I love analogies. So there's analogies everywhere, which therefore give people the confidence to be able to do the program and know that they're doing the right thing. Because I'm sure we've all heard, as people are putting, butter on their vegetables, everyone's going to them, "Oh, you're going to clog your arteries with all that butter. What are you doing to yourself?" And so even though they might be okay with the idea, when you get bombarded by this, "What are you doing to yourself?" message, it's like, well, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Maybe this isn't right. And so you start doubting yourself. So our goal, I guess, is to try and break down some of the science for them to make it easy, clear, simple, using, as I said, analogies or an experience so that people have a really good understanding of why this will work for them and why it's important. So we've got a number of courses in the pipeline. The one is a bit like a holistic program and essentially focusing on insulin as the cause of our health issues. And so a lot of that is about diet, but interestingly, not all of it, because I'm sure we all hear people that are doing low carb but not losing weight or not gaining the health benefits that they're wanting. And so in particular, my experience is that a lot of, particularly women, it's cortisol. Cortisol is just as important as insulin. Women live these super stressed lives of balancing and juggling, and they're trying to go to work, they're working, they're mothering, they're wifing, they're daughtering, they're doing all of these things. They've got this huge cognitive load, which just means lots of jobs in their head, and spending all of this time trying to get everything right and trying to be perfect and feeling like they're not actually achieving anything. So we talk a lot about that and some, I guess, practical tips on how to manage that and what sort of things that you can do to help that. And at the end of the day, we know that the whole issue with cortisol stems back to insulin. So cortisol makes you more insulin resistant. So it all goes back to insulin in the end. Same with sleep. We talk a lot about sleep and how important sleep is and how our society doesn't value sleep at all. In fact, we, hero worship people that, are billionaires because they've only had 4 hours of sleep a night for their whole life. And then again, it's not just talking why you need to do these things. It's actually going into the how to do them, how to sleep well. What sort of things can you do to do that? Basically, what we're doing is putting them into little bite-sized chunks, nuggets of gold that you don't have to dedicate hours searching through, as I said, 500 videos and watching a half an hour one on various studies, because we've done all of that. The information's there if people want it, but really they can just go to the synopsis, I guess, and work out how to put that into their own practical terms. And then my big thing with all of this stuff is that it's like you have to actually do it. You can't just watch a video. It's the doing that is really important.
I can't tell you how many exercise DVDs I have where I've been sucked into, it's a celebrity DVD or whatever, been sucked into how this looks like fun. And I've watched it.
Yeah.
And I've never actually done it.
I know. I think it's it's the promise, isn't it? Again, one of my analogies is that you can watch the videos and it's a bit like you can go to piano lessons. And if you go every week, at the end of the year, you might be able to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. But if you want to be able to play, one of your favourite songs from Coldplay, then you've got to practice. And a bit like this, you put it into practice. But just like when you're learning the piano, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. The key to it is you just keep going. You don't give up. You don't decide that, you can't do it, you're hopeless, and that you're happy with Mary Had a Little Lamb. You just plough on, and week by week, little by little, you get better and better until the end you can sight, read and play everything. I have zero musical skill, by the way, so...
Not talking from personal experience that you can now play whatever from Coldplay.
No.
Tell us about your woodshed analogy. You mentioned it earlier. I think this is probably a good time to talk about that.
Absolutely. And again, it's hard when people, you're learning all these scientific terms like, insulin and glucose, and then you throw in a bit of glucagon and then some really other, hormones like even... and glucagon, which is a hormone, and then glycogen, and even I get those mixed up. They sound almost the same. It's crazy. So I just basically break it down into really simple terms, and I go, okay, our body is like a fireplace, and it needs fuel. And when you're eating our standard diet, next to your fireplace is a huge pile of kindling, and they're like the carbs. And when you put carbs or kindling onto your fireplace, it burns hot and quick. So you get a bit of energy and you go, oh, good, and you're ready to go, but then it dies down. And so what we should be doing is putting a log on the fireplace. Now, a log is our fat stores. So our logs are stored out in our shed. So we toddle out to the shed and we, look in the window, and some people have a very big woodshed and it's all lined up ready to go, but they go to open the door and it's locked. And the lock on the door is insulin. Depending on how high your insulin is and how resistant you are, you might actually have 1, 2, 3, 5 locks on the door. So no matter what you do, you can't get the lock. So you go back to your fireplace and just go, oh, well, I'm just going to have to use the carbs. So that's when we go, well, I'm hungry now, I'm going to have to eat again. So you put another log on. What happens with low carb is that we go, okay, we've got to get this insulin down. The thing that puts the insulin up is your carbohydrate, so we're going to take away all this kindling. And then you've just got a fireplace with nothing. So initially, in particular, you really need to have quite a bit of fat as your fuel. So your woodshed's still not open, so you go off to the shop, you buy some logs, and you put them next to your fireplace. And what that does when you're burning those is it lowers your insulin, so your padlocks come off your shed. So then eventually when people, and this is my favourite time, people come in and they go, Lucy, I cannot eat another serve of bacon and eggs. And I go, good. That means your woodshed's open. When you no longer want to eat bacon and eggs, your woodshed is open. And so that means, you know what, you're not hungry. Your body's saying to you, I don't need any more fat. My shed is open. And so you've got your own logs, just burn them. And they go, oh. And it's that same idea that, and one of my favourite sayings is chop hungry. And what I mean by that is that if you're at a barbecue and people are handing around the leftover sausages and chops, and they go, anyone want one of these? And you go, oh, no, I'm so full, couldn't possibly fit that in. But then they bring out the dessert and the pavlova, and everyone's going, oh, yes, suddenly, yeah. Yeah. And that's the problem with breakfast cereals and things like that, is that there is always room for breakfast cereal because it's the equivalent of pavlova. So people are going to me, I can't eat eggs in the morning, I can't face them. I go, good, you know what, you're not hungry. So your shed's open, your body's got fuel, just power on without them. Ah, they say. But I'm bored with bacon and eggs. I go, yeah, no, you're not. You're just not actually hungry, because in the old days when you ate breakfast cereal every day for breakfast, you generally, people eat the same cereal for like 10 years. No one ever complains that they're bored with that.
Yeah, that's what I don't get. When people say they get bored with bacon and eggs, or they get bored with eggs every day, and you ask them what they've been eating.
Yeah.
And it will be, toast every day, or breakfast cereal every day, whatever it is. Breakfast is one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah.
That most people have the same thing every day, and they're fine with that.
Yeah.
Until suddenly it's bacon and eggs. Well, now I'm fine with bacon and eggs every day. I've eaten bacon and eggs for breakfast every day for about 3 years now.
Yeah. And if you don't want them, it's because your body's saying to yourself, don't eat. You're not hungry. Your shed's open. You've got fuel. Because when you're hungry, you can always eat them. But yeah. And in fact, that brings me, I've got this sort of list of golden rules that I love banging on about. And one of them is that variety is not the spice of life. We're always taught, you have to have a big varied diet. And actually, as long as your diet is nutritionally complete, you don't need a lot of variety. I think that's part of our current problem, is that, again, in the 70s when I grew up, there was Chinese takeaway and that was about it. And you went there maybe, for birthdays. These days, because there's obviously all the fast food restaurants, but there's also Thai and there's Indian and there's Moroccan and there's a whole variety of different types of cuisine, many of which are carbohydrate based. So you've either got noodles or you've got rice or you've got bread with your Turkish stuff. This idea that you're sick of something, so you'll have a different form of it. It's really just, it just isn't helpful for us. So I guess that's part of that mindset change, though, is when people start getting bored, it's actually okay. Well, you can look at it as that, or you can look at it as, right, well, my body is saying to me, I'm full, I don't need to eat, so great. And I'm always thinking, fantastic, I don't need to wash any dishes, I don't need to pack anything. It's so much easier. I don't need the fuel. I can just power on without it, and it becomes simple. Same with your food. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to be doing gourmet everything. You just keep it simple, keep it delicious, have variety in that you're getting enough of your nutrients. But, if you eat the same food every day, that's okay too.
It's a good way to tune into your hunger signals, actually, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because like you say, as long as you're eating stuff that nutritionally is giving you what you need, if you're bored of it, you're probably actually not very hungry. Because if you're really hungry, it'll be very, very delicious. Because that's the thing, isn't it?
Yes.
You know that when you're in those situations, when you're so hungry, that things taste so much better, don't they? And anything does.
Absolutely.
So you're right, is that variety can actually be a problem.
Absolutely. And one of my little techniques is that almost every time I'm eating now, I say to myself, am I either chop or fried egg hungry? Am I fried egg hungry? Would I eat a fried egg now? And if the answer is no, then I'm not really hungry. Doesn't mean I have to have a fried egg every time, but it's that concept of would I eat a chop right now? And I can tell you in the mornings, I'm not hungry. I'm not a morning hungry person. And the funny thing is that, in the olden days, before I was enlightened, if we went out for breakfast, I would always order, the pancakes or the French toast, or if I was feeling, righteous, it would be the muesli with the fruit and the dried compote of something or other and the yogurt, because I could eat them because they weren't fatty foods, whereas now I actually rarely go out to breakfast, or if I do, I just have coffee because I can't eat any in the morning. I'm still not hungry. And that's fine. It's great. It's awesome. It's cheap. I don't have to pay a lot. I don't have to worry. And I guess that's part of one of my thoughts is that, people talk a lot about what they can't do, what they can't have. There's a lot of lamenting about I can't have I can't have bread, or I can't have this, or they'll say, and I went to a place and there was nothing that I could eat. And it is all about training your mind. And I guess I did learn this from my vegetarian children. Tragically, I have children who are vegetarian. Despite my best efforts.
Them yet.
No, not yet. No, seriously considering it. But But when they go, if they're going somewhere and someone offers them some meat thing, they don't say, "Oh no, I can't eat meat." They say, "I don't eat meat," and people go, "Oh, okay," and they don't question them. Or if they go, they might say, "Why not?" And they go, "I just don't want to," and that's fine. But when you say to somebody, if someone is offering you a piece of cake, and you go, "Oh no, I can't eat cake," everyone goes, "Why not?" You go, "Oh, I'm trying to be good." And people go, "Oh, go on, one bit won't hurt. It'll be fine. It's your birthday or it's something or other." And they try and cajole you into having it. Whereas if you approach it more like, the cake comes around and my thing is, "Oh, no, thanks. I don't eat cake." People go, "Oh," and they might say, "Why not?" And my line is always, "It doesn't agree with me." That can mean anything.
Yeah.
No one's going to ask you. They're not going to say, "What do you mean?" Because, you might come up with all sorts of gastrointestinal effects. But you have made it very clear that you don't eat cake. There's no need for them to start cajoling you. So I know I was sort of getting a bit off track here. But yeah, I love that idea that you are empowered then by saying, "I don't do it," rather than being this kind of slight victim where you can't.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it, how a simple turn of phrase can make such a big difference.
Absolutely. And I think and as you know, a lot of people want to do low carb and for whatever reason they find it difficult. And some of it is that they don't really understand why they're doing it. It's just another diet to stick to. And I think certainly understanding why it's helpful, but also it's managing your mind and training your mind to overcome the chatter in the background and coming up with various little tricks that you can teach your mind when it starts telling you that, you're deprived or that you really want something. And another analogy is, I talk about the toddler brain, and the toddler brain is the one that wants the donuts, or it wants to stay up late, or it just wants to, do things that you probably know are not in your best interest. And it'll keep asking, and sometimes it'll nag. And people refer to that as your reptilian brain or your primitive brain. But, again, reptilian brain doesn't really gel with me, but a toddler brain does. And
everyone knows what a tantruming toddler's like. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that our neocortex, that's the parent brain. That's the brain that has to come in and go, "You know what? I know you want that, but you're not having it, or it's not good for you, so we're going to put it away." And it's the brain that will come in, and if you're tempted by, a bowl of lollies, the parent brain is the one that says, "You know what? Move away from those," or put them away. It's the one that doesn't say to the toddler, "Yeah, have whatever you want." Because at the end of the day, we have to parent our own brain. And the interesting thing that happens with your toddler brain, if someone else comes in to parent it, like if someone else comes in and says, "Do you really think you should be having that?" Your parent brain comes into full defense mode and goes, "Yes, I should have that. And in fact, I'm going to have two." So knowing how your brain works, again, give you some more tools to understand what you need to do in order to be able to maintain this lifestyle forever.
And mindset's another important subject, isn't it? You mentioned before we started recording that's another course you have is mindset, particularly for people who are struggling to maintain this sort of lifestyle.
Absolutely. And it's biting it down into chunks that are manageable, I guess, so you're not overwhelmed. Because again, a lot of the reason people can't stick to low carb is overwhelm. They just feel, "Oh my God, there's too many things to do. I can't do this one." So again, we don't want to make a course that adds to that overwhelm, but breaking it down into small, easily digestible, like that pun, nuggets of information that people can then use in their practical terms. And again, with some ongoing workbooks, that's the practice bit of it. That's like the practicing the piano. You have to do some exercises to manage your mind because your mind doesn't change straight away. Are you ready for another analogy? It's a bit like...
Is it a dog one?
Well, no, this one's... Well, there's two. I do have a dog one, but I'm going to do a date one first. So the date one is that when you're writing the date, and you write, like today, whatever it is, the 20th of November 2019, you write 2011-19, and you do that and it just rolls off the pen, no problem. And you do it all through November, and then you get to December and you're still just writing, 25th of the 12th, 19, no problem. Then you come to January, and of course you keep writing 19 even though you know it's 20. And so you have to correct it. You just go, ugh, and you just correct it and move on. You have to try really hard to remember it's 20. And we do that all through January. And in February, we start to get it right sometimes. And if we're distracted or tired, we still get it wrong. And so we just correct and move on. And it's really not until about March that it actually just flows off the pen, where you go, oh, right, it's now, 20th of March 2020. And so what I say to people, so it takes 3 months to get a 9-month habit to change, because you only really had it for the last 9 months, because the first 3 months were getting it right. So it takes 3 months to change that 9-month habit. So again, if we've got a habit that's 40 years old, it's going to take a little while. But when we're changing this habit, we don't berate ourselves. We don't, get angry. You might get a tiny bit of frustration, but you just correct it and move on. And then you don't think about it. You don't mull it over. We just go, oh, it's not 19, it's 2020. And so that ensures that we continue on. But the other thing is, there's no option not to keep going. We don't get to decide, I'm not doing 2020, I'm just going to stay with 2019.
That's true, yeah.
And we don't get to say, oh, look, I tried and I kept failing, so it's too hard for me, this isn't for me. Nobody does that. You just keep going. And so that's exactly the same with any habit change. Once you take the going back out of the picture, once you tell your brain it's no option to eat lollies every night on the couch or whatever, then that makes the chatter a lot easier. One of the other things I find is, particularly about mindset, is comparison. And I call it comparisonitis. And sometimes people come in and they have this idea that it's easy for other people for whatever reason. And so, it's hard for them. And I get it. For a lot of people, it is hard. But it's actually hard for most people, depending on your mindset. And as an example, and again, people listening to this podcast or seeing me on, some of the YouTube things or in the course, things, look kind of easy for me. I'm a doctor. I've got it all sorted. It's like I've got my shit together. But the thing is, in the background, so I've got muscular dystrophy. Muscular dystrophy is a muscle wasting condition. It's not a great condition to have. It basically means that my muscles waste away, which sounds pretty awful. And so when I was growing up, I had normal muscle function, very active person, and in fact probably managed my weight a lot just by running. Anyway, now I can no longer run, and really even walking's tricky. But for me, it's like, all right, well, this is less than ideal, but you know what? It is what it is. I can't change that. All I can do is manage it. And again, that's where low carb comes back as perfect for me, because I don't have the muscle mass to support a high carbohydrate diet. And that's a little bit technical. But people looking on the outside would think I've got it made. Of course she's going to be easy for her. She's a doctor, she's got all this stuff. How hard can it be? And I find that when we compare ourselves to other people, the story in our head is often that it's easy for them, or that it's too hard for me because of X, Y, and Z. And in fact, everybody is on their own journey, and everybody has their own challenges. And the key to a challenge is about managing your mindset around that challenge. So, one of the options for me would be, I can no longer exercise. My life is shit. I can't walk anywhere. I have to use a walking stick. What are people going to say about me? How can I be a doctor when I'm sort of, can barely get out of a chair? I'm just going to sit in my couch and eat chocolate for the rest of my life. That would be one option. And, a lot of people would say, oh, well, I can understand why she eats chocolate. Look at her life. That's not the option I'm going for. That's not the story I'm living in my head. The story in my head is, yeah, I've got a few challenges, but you know what? There's technology out there. There's assistance. There's things that help me that, I'm taking advantage of. And I'm going to maximize every opportunity that I have to overcome whatever, obstacles are in my way, because we can all overcome them. it's when you feel that you can't overcome them that you then fall into, you become a bit like a victim. And when you're a victim, the problem with that mentality is it's like you have no options, you have no choice, you can't get out of it. And in fact, every single person has a choice on how they're going to think about things. And sometimes they may not know that choice. And again, that's where people can help them sort of see other ways to look at things. But yeah, comparing yourself to others, it never works. It just, in fact, I think it was some sort of one of those Roosevelt people, Eleanor or Teddy or somebody, said that comparison is the thief of all joy.
Mm.
And it's true. You look around and if you start comparing your lot in life to other people's, we never compare ourselves to, someone less, well, sometimes we compare ourselves to people that are less fortunate, and then we just feel guilty, which is terrible, another great emotion to make us eat. But we often compare ourselves to other people without knowing the whole story.
Well, exactly. You're not actually comparing like to like, are you? Because you're comparing yourself on the very intimate portrait that you know about yourself.
Yes.
But you're comparing that with the external portrait that somebody else is putting out there.
Yep.
You have no idea what's going on in the inside. So you're not actually comparing like to like in the first place. You're comparing yourself with some, figment of, partly of your own imagination about somebody else.
Absolutely. Imaginary perfection is what you're comparing. That, they've got it, they can do it. Why can't, and again, it can be they can do it. Why can't I? I'm hopeless. And again, that's part of the mindset is, and women in particular don't ever praise themselves, or rarely do. Again, we've got this sort of tall poppy mentality, particularly Australians, and I think probably British. I'm not sure. Again, I think American people, in their culture, it's a little bit more acceptable to cheer yourself on. There's a lot more cheering that goes on.
Yeah, I think it's less prevalent in America.
Yeah. Whereas here, we don't cheer anybody on. It's like, oh my God, if you're too successful, then you need to be taken down a peg. And that's what we do in our own heads. So we don't ever praise ourselves because it feels weird. And, but again, if you're the dog, and I can't remember if I've done this one yet. If you're doing, did I do the sit? If you're
You've done the sit, yeah.
So if you're the dog and you're sitting and the owner doesn't tell you you're doing it right, you then wonder, are you doing it wrong? The idea is, again, when you do something that you want to do, we need to bang on about it, cheer ourselves on, party in your head over, and it can be something small. And again, this is one of my stories. I'm not a morning person. That's the story in my head, even though right now I got up at 5:45, which is unearthly for me. And quite often I don't want to get out of bed in the morning, even to go to work. I just lie in bed and I have this discussion about, wouldn't it be nice just to stay in bed all day? I don't want to go to work. It's terrible. It's going to be busy. It would be so much easier if I could just stay in bed all day and play on my phone. And quite often that's the story. I'm having that, and I get to the point where I go, oh my God, I've got to get out of bed. The patient's going to be there in 10 minutes and I'm still in bed. And literally I'm flying into the house. And it sets me up for a bad day, which then, of course, reconfirms that thought in my mind that my day is going to be terrible. So one day I changed the story in my head. I just stopped saying this to myself. I said to myself, okay, the alarm's gone off, get out of bed. I go, oh, okay. So I hop into the shower, and as I'm in the shower, I'm doing this. Oh my God, Lucy, good girl. You got up. You got straight up. Bit like talking to the dog. Well done. This is awesome. Fantastic. Good. Excellent. And so I did that. And after about 3 or 4 days, I did start feeling really good. And I started saying to myself, my God, you're so awesome. Wow, you're amazing. And again, these are for little things like, getting out of bed. I'm not, I haven't won a Nobel Prize for literature. I've got out of bed, but this party in my head is really over the top praise for doing the right thing or for doing the thing that I wanted to do. And by doing that then just sort of flowed on for the rest of my day to set that up as being a good day. Again, anybody looking at me wouldn't know that every morning I was having this little struggle about getting out of bed. They just think, oh, she's organised. Well, in fact, no one thinks I'm organised. I'm messy. But they think she's, got her stuff together. And so, again, back to that comparison, that idea that we can't compare ourselves to anybody else because we don't know the whole picture.
The things you've just been talking about is it's so wrapped up with judgment as well. Judgment of ourselves and judgment of other people. You have this whole judging people's capabilities by what they look like. I mean, I'm really sick of seeing that. Well, I wouldn't take nutritional advice from her because she's obese.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, no.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get rid of that judgment when you don't know about that other person. We just need to let go of all that.
Absolutely. And I think that, and you see that, I mean, and I guess that's part of our social media problem, is that you might see a picture of somebody and it's a snapshot of their life, and they may be overweight, but they may have come from a place where they were more overweight and they're on their journey to losing it.
Exactly.
And so why would you in 1 second decide that person's not qualified to talk to you?
And all the great experience they've gained in doing that makes them, especially if that's the kind of journey you're on, makes them exactly the kind of person that is worth listening to, because they're going to understand where you're coming from and actually be able to give you very good advice.
I could not agree more. And I think that we see, particularly personal trainers and young dietitians are often very slim. They've never had a weight problem. There's a term in medical school that we learnt that pediatrics, children are not small adults. They have different physiology. We know that women are not small men. We have different physiology. And an overweight or obese person, they're not just a big, skinny person. They have different physiology. What works to keep a person who has never had insulin resistant slim, that's not going to work for somebody who has insulin resistance. And when it doesn't work, sometimes the person will blame themselves or society blames them. It goes back to that thing I was telling you about with the two kids, where one has no insulin resistance and the other one does. They're eating the same food, but we judge the other one. It's just not right. We need to stop the judgment. And it's really interesting how we do it. And when you stop judging, it's one of our things that I don't know why we all do it, but I found in my own head, when I stop judging other people and I purposely stop commenting and commentating on other people, I am much kinder to myself as well. So it's a really hard thing, and I don't know if that's going to go away anytime soon, the whole judgy thing, particularly with social media and Instagram. Instagram's like an Insta. That's the bit. It's an instant. It's not called a yilligram. It's really just that microsecond, and we need to, just every now and then. Again, I guess it goes back to that thing of being kind, doesn't it? Kind and compassionate to ourselves and everyone around us, and that creates for a much better world.
Absolutely. Well, it's been great hearing what you're up to, having a catch up, seeing all the new things you've been doing, hearing some of your analogies.
I know. And Daisy, I also just wanted to talk to your listeners briefly about this idea that we've, a group of us in Australia are forming, is about having a summit next year.
Mm-hmm.
The summit is basically, it came about because there are as I said, there's a lot of information out there on low carb, and a lot of it is generic advice, but we think that women in particular need women advice. Women, as I just mentioned, women are not small men. Women are completely different to men. We have completely different physiology, but also our emotional upbringing and the way we're nurtured in our current environment is different. And so we have our own needs. And we want to do a summit for women, by women, about health. And so you're going to be speaking on the summit, which will be great. And we're getting a whole host of other women involved in there to talk, again, nothing overwhelming. We want to keep it manageable and achievable and, practical, I guess is the thing. Women love practical stuff. Maybe some people love the science and delving right down in, and that's great. But we also need practical tips to be able to make this thing sustainable and make it real, which is interesting. Just that's the name of, I forgot to mention the name of our new business, and we have Facebook pages and all that stuff, and it's called Real Life Medicine because our big thing is we're real. We're not some unattainable fitness coach who's got a six-pack. We all have our own lived experiences, and it's about being healthy and being real and not being perfect. Because again, this idea that women, if you don't have the perfect body, then you're not good enough. And that is so wrong.
No, I agree. And we were talking about this before we started recording. We both think the same way about how great these conferences are that you can go to, actual real life conferences. But I'm a big fan of these online conferences, online summits, whatever you like to call them, that anyone can watch anywhere.
Yes.
It's so much more attainable and affordable. Apart from anything else, when you watch them in the moment, they're free anyway.
Yes.
So it's a fantastic, great free resource. Also, I love this idea about it being female centric. Again, we're thinking along the same lines. As you know, that's really the mainstay behind this podcast, is from hearing predominantly from women about women, and in inverted commas, normal women too, who just have these extraordinary stories.
Yeah, real women. And I think it is really important as women to, women you can have a fantastic sisterhood, or we can tear each other down. And it's really, and some of that is, I don't know why we do it. Some of it is, insecurity. I read this amazing book once when my kids were little called Queen Bees and Wannabes. And it was really interesting talking about the dynamics of friendship groups in teenagers. And then as I looked through, I thought, oh my God, some women can live like this all the time. I've seen it, when I used to go and visit nursing homes. There's women in there and they're still having the dramas. But again, if we change our mindset around that, instead of criticizing it, instead of being insecure, instead of coming from a place of fear, coming from a place of kindness and compassion, then women are so, that resource and that community is so powerful.
Absolutely.
And I think, Daisy, you've done a brilliant job fostering the KKBs and keeping that community mindset there. And again, it's that thing, isn't it? You see it on social media where people write something and someone else tears them down, and you think, seriously, did you mean to be that harsh? Like, was that necessary? Can we just, be kind? We don't need to, God, sounding like.
And it's not necessary though. But that's the point. And if you foster a different environment, you see how that thing doesn't happen, or it happens very, very rarely.
Yes.
You can have these groups that are just kind to each other and supportive. Yeah. And as far as I'm concerned, the more the better with all these things, the more the better with, more podcasts, more conferences, more summits, the more the better. There are billions of people out there who are interested in this information. It's not a highly competitive market anymore that we're all fighting over a handful of people in our local environment.
Yeah.
That's the beauty, isn't it, now, of technology and the internet. There's just this endless resource of people who are interested.
Yes, abundance mentality.
More the better.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
which I love. I love abundance mentality. And I think that's part of where we can be, if we don't come from that place, we get all protective and territorial and tear people down just to make sure that, they're not as good as me and I'm the better one and you need to come and see me or do this or do that. And it's completely unnecessary. It's about creating an environment where people are thriving and not just surviving.
Absolutely. Well, I shall get from you after we finish recording all the links and all the things, and we'll put them all in the show notes.
Thank you.
People can find them all very easily. But perhaps you could leave us, as is customary, with a top tip.
Okay, so This is my top tip that I did for myself, and it's really simple. And it's a rule. And again, back to the dog analogy, one of my rules. So with the dog, I do bang on a bit, but with the dog.
Yeah, dog analogies are good. You know, you're always going to win with me with anything about dogs.
So if you've got a dog and the rule is that the dog sits in the basket, and you sit on the couch and everyone's happy. The dog sleeps in the basket all night, no problem. But then one day you feel a little, I don't know, maybe you're tired or you want a little snuggle with the dog. So you let it up on the couch and, you're a bit happy and the dog's happy and you're patting it and it's all lovely. And then you put the dog outside and you come back and you look at the couch and go, oh my God, it's covered in dog hair. I forgot. That's why I don't have the dog on the couch. So then the next day, the dog tries to get back up on the couch and you go, no. And you spend, weeks keeping the dog in the basket and it's looking at you with its big eyes and it's real, and then you give in, you go, all right, you can come on the couch. And so you have this rule that the dog sleeps in the basket, but it's quite a rubbery rule. So then the dog gets confused. It doesn't know what it's doing. And every night it's going to have a crack at getting on the couch. So every day you have this conversation about, no, you're not doing it today. Oh, all right, I'll give in, yes. And some days you let it up and some days you don't. So sometimes having rules that are achievable, I mean, not stupid rules like, I'm trying to think of a stupid rule now, but this is one of my simple rules that I now abide by, and it's a win-win for a lot of people, is that I don't eat in the car. And when I don't eat in the car, that actually satisfies a whole heap of my other rules, which is I don't snack.
Yeah.
So if you don't snack, when you eat in the car, it's usually a snack. I only eat when I'm hungry. Well, eating in the car, again, I would rather wait till I get home and have something on a plate. It satisfies my rule of I don't have to go and buy something processed from a shop because, that's, again, what we'll do if we eat in the car. So my rule, I don't eat in the car. Makes it simple.
Okay, so going back to this analogy, what happens when I'm looking over to my right where my bed is? Two of my dogs are on the bed. So what happens when they're not only allowed on the sofa, but they're allowed on the bed? So I'm just ruined forever.
And you know what though? You can have that rule and that's fine, But yes, I know. It's very hard, isn't it? But it's exactly the same. So yes. I think that there's no hope for you and the dog.
I know what you mean, though.
Yes.
It's setting clear boundaries, basically, for whatever you decide is important, I guess. So that's the thing. So for me, that rule is not important to me.
No, you're happy with the dog.
I gave up on that long ago. Maybe something will come along where that needs to change. But then that's where you're saying that's where it would be very difficult to change that. So, if I met somebody, for example, who wasn't a fan of half the bed being taken up by the dogs.
Yes, exactly.
To then change that, to suddenly change the rules would be very unfair on the dogs who are very used to it.
There would, but like anything, they would push back at first and then they would accept it. Because you would do all the behavioural changes that come with what you would need to do. You would be putting the dog in the basket and you pat them and you reward them and you go, good dog, and you do it that way so that you then praise the dog knowing what it has to do and rewarding that and keeping that boundary clear, and eventually the dog would go, oh, this is the new rule. And again, that's another analogy for giving up. Say you don't want to eat chocolate anymore. You've done it your whole life, but you stop and the brain goes, hang on, I didn't agree to this. And you go, well, that's a rule now. And so you just keep reminding yourself and you praise yourself when you get it right and realize that sometimes the dog might try and get back up on the bed, and you just correct and move on. And eventually the dog learns what the new rule is and your brain stops eating chocolate.
Either that, or if I ever do meet someone, I train them instead.
Absolutely. That may well be easier.
Priorities.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, thank you very much, Lucy. It's been a great pleasure talking to you.
No problem. And I'm super excited about this summit. I think it'll be a great resource for everybody and, bring it on.
I'm sure. Yeah. Well, good luck with everything. We look forward to seeing how well you do with everything.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
To get the resources and links from this show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com/episodes. Please share this podcast with as many people as possible by sharing one of my links or just taking a screenshot of an episode that you enjoyed. Reviews really help raise the profile of the podcast, which gets it in front of more people, but also helps me attract a wide variety of guests. So please take a minute to leave a review on whichever podcast app or platform you like to listen on. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support really does mean the world to me. Thank you. Are you enjoying this podcast? Help me make more episodes and videos by making a pledge at my Patreon page, patreon.com/KetoWoman. Or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman Podcast website. Don't forget to join in the fun on the Keto Woman Podcast Instagram and Facebook pages, and Daisy_Keto Woman on Twitter. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you would like to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. This week's end quote is from Bruce Lee. If you spend too much time thinking about a thing, you'll never get it done. Bye-bye, Keto Lovelies.